Joining us now, we're live in Des Moines, Iowa on the Godzilla Truth Bus with Job Creators Network. Curtis Elson, Lane Parker. Joining us now is Congressman from Iowa, long-term Congressman Steve King is with us. Congressman King, you're in Iowa, we're in Iowa. Great to have you, sir.
It's great to be on. I had a great meeting with Curtis yesterday, and it spawned this discussion, so I'm looking forward to having it, John.
Well, listen, we're really excited that you're on. What I'd like to do is I'm going to get to politics and then get to some of your issues, if I may, Congressman. Mm-hmm. Let's start with politics and your race. After a couple comments you made, leadership strip you of your committee assignments, which we were, to be honest, Congressman, I was appalled by that move, because you look at what some of the Democrats have done. They all stay on their committees. You've got a primary challenge. Tell us about your race and how you're going to win that.
Okay, well, first on this stripping of committees, that it's only happened 4 times in the history of the United States Congress to 4 people. And the other 3 are convicted federal felons. And these geniuses can't come up with a single law or rule that I've violated or even circumvented or thought about circumventing. They've got nothing. And it was just to hang me out on the yardarm so they could point at me and say, now, why don't you go politically lynch the Quad Squad because they're worse. Well, that gambit failed. And so now I'm still dangling out there. And the injustice of this will be corrected one day. But I'm in this place where the hierarchy of the Republican Party, I believe, has made it come to some kind of a conclusion that they would go ahead and I'll say violate the good word that says it's wrong to do evil, even if good should come from it. But they must think that they push me under the bus, then they'll save a congressional seat here in Iowa. What they've missed completely is, in the last election, the chairman of the NRCC, Steve Stivers of Ohio, a close friend of John Boehner, whom we managed to remove as Speaker of the House, and I was a player in that, came out against me a week before the election. And when he did that, when the NRCC comes out against you, it validates all the other attacks. And the window we didn't have window to correct that. And so we lost 10 points in that week, and they raised, the National Republican Congressional Committee raised $1.5 million for my Democrat opponent in that same week. So that's what I was faced with. And so they create now the narrative that I can't beat this Democrat. Well, it's kind of hard if you've got your own party working against you, but I did it, and I can do it again. We won't have the party against me this time, at least, and I will say we will have the party for me, maybe not before the primary, but after. They really aren't going to have a lot of choice, since they don't have a leg to stand on. And by the way, any of those quotes that they pointed to, almost every one of them is a misquote, and I can tell you every one of them is mischaracterized, taken out of context, or even flipped 180 degrees. I had a literary scholar go down. He just decided to take it on himself, went down through all of them, going back through the ages. So when you go to the original source, you're clean as can be, and it's all been cooked up. And that's the world we live in today, this social media world of people that are not accountable for the things they say and do to other people, as long as they're remotely done at a keyboard.
Congressman, let me ask you something. What the Republican leadership apparatus did to you in stripping you of your committees, you're duly elected by the people in the 4th District of Iowa. Haven't they basically disenfranchised an entire congressional district in the heartland of the country by making this punitive measure to kick you off committee? So the people that you're representing don't have an equal advocate and a voice on the committees like the other 434 districts in the United States.
Well, how do they do that? Kevin McCarthy is the House Minority Leader. He made a unilateral decision, and I don't know from him what brought that decision about, but I can tell you that this was orchestrated. The hit was called from very high up the chain, I believe above the chain of Kevin McCarthy, and perhaps from the desk of a multi-billionaire or 2 or 3. And I got a pretty good idea, but I can't say because I can't prove it at this point. But in any case, they set this up, they orchestrated it. It was not organic. Nobody in the business believes it was organic. I got a heads up that it was going to happen, and there were 3 dates that I know I talked to Curtis about, January 8th, 9th, and 10th of this past year, that confirm that there are no coincidences in politics, and those dates confirm it. And if you go to them in any detail, so it was set up from above. I saw it coming. I stepped up to prevent it, and they pulled the trigger when they learned that I knew what was coming up. They didn't want to give me any more time to preempt their strategy. And once that happened, the January 10th story that came down in the New York Times became the trigger. And once that happened, then all of these other things fell in place. That was on a Thursday, and by Sunday, Kevin McCarthy was on national TV early in the morning telling people, that I'm going to punish Steve King. He implied he was going to take me off of committees on TV, but in the green room, he was quoted by the press as saying, I'm going to kick King off of all of his committees. He got away with it because he controls everybody else's committees in the House of Representatives, too, and they don't want to lose. They don't want to be treated the same way. Plus, the misinformation, this is something I've learned, is that when something boils up and becomes this viral sweep that goes across the country, it takes weeks and months to get down to the truth of it before people can absorb it. This was a quick reaction thing, and they pulled the trigger on it before the public could catch up with the truth, and before the other members could too.
We're with Congressman Steve King, Republican, representing the 4th District of Iowa. He's been there since 2003, right?
03 was I sworn in January of 03.
Right, so you've been there since 03. You're in a primary battle, several other Republicans. Congressman, if you win renomination, I'm going to get to your other issues in a minute. If you win renomination, and I think you will in a scattered field, and I think you'll get reelected in 2020, how do they keep you off committees then?
Well, I don't think they can, but if I'd asked that question, coming into this previous Congress, if somebody would have said they're going to kick you off of all of your committees if you don't speak in a 100% consistent, politically correct way, I would have said, you're nuts. You can't do that to me. You can't get away with it politically. The public will rise up. They'll realize what's going on. But, when the news media and the whole machinery line up against you, who knows what could happen? I don't think they'd have a leg to stand on. I think I would go back on my committees. Something else, too, is that where this stands in this is now a 5-way primary. And there's a chosen candidate there, but he's 44 points below me in the polls. And we are at 59% in a 5-way race.
No way.
44 points.
You're at 59%? Congressman, you're at 59% in a 5-way race?
Yes. And at 72% approval rating. And by the way, it'd be hard to believe my own polls if I hadn't had the first poll leaked to me in last February, where they had me at 57% in a 4-way with a 75% approval rating. It stayed. I got better across this time a little bit, but it's statistically the same. Yeah,
right. Congressman, are you trying to tell us that people don't believe the fake news media?
They don't. And it almost brought tears to my eyes when I read my poll, and I could see that they discerned something that I have all kinds of detailed information on that they couldn't have possibly had the chance to absorb, but they knew the truth anyway. And
your constituents know you. I mean, that's the bottom line. You get a poll like that, it doesn't matter what the establishment Republican says or what the power apparatus says or the Wall Street donors that are funding the Kevin McCarthy effort, Goldman Sachs. Your constituents know you. That's why you're going to get renominated, and you're going to win in 2020 again, and you're going to get your committee seats back. Let's get to two important things happening right now. I want to start with the Iraq vote, the new AUMF the other day. Can you break that down for us, Congressman?
Well, I can to a degree. I mean, it was there was a bill that was just a vehicle that they used, maybe HR 550, I think, and that put on two amendments. Let's see, the two Democrats from California, Barbara Lee, and the other one is, Rahana, I think, and the one would one of them would prohibit any funds from being spent to go into operations against Iran. And they would essentially nullify the authorization for use of military force, the AUMFs of 2001 and 2, and require that we have a declared war before we could do any operations against Iran or any of their interests. And then that was in Barbara Lee's was a similar way that hers was to nullify the AUMFs. And in either case, it would gut the president's ability to defend us against these terrorists that are being fomented in Iran and by Iran. And so that's, both of them would tie the hands of the president, and it would leave America, I'll say, just open to Iranian aggression. And the only way that we could legally go forward and do operations in preemption or retaliation against them would be if the House would declare war against Iran. We haven't declared war since World War II, and there have only been about 4 different conflicts that's happened in the history of the United States of America. And so that's how bad their ideas were. And they are, and it takes me back to when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker the previous time, and we were involved in the surge in Iraq. She forced 44 votes on the floor of the House of Representatives that were designed to unfund, underfund, or undermine our troops while they were in the heaviest part of that conflict. It cost American lives. This does the same thing. It emboldens our enemies, costs American lives, and that stuff's not going anywhere, I don't believe, in the United States Senate, and the president certainly veto it.
But, Congressman, isn't it fair to ask the question why we're operating off an AUMF that was passed in 2001 after the towers went down? I mean, that was 2 decades ago. We're still operating off that. Isn't it fair to say that we need a debate on that? We need a different one than something that happened 2 decades ago?
Well, that is a fair question. And I'd say also
Thank
the
you.
2002 AUMF is a stronger document in support of our operations today. But they're both relevant, and I would like to be in a place where we had a Congress that would reasonably consider this and rewrite an AUMF that reflected the threats that we have today. Not a declaration of war, because I don't think we could get that passed. And yet today in this political climate, it's Nancy Pelosi that would determine what comes to the floor of the House and what comes off the floor of the House. And so you've seen what comes off the floor of the House. They would handcuff the President of the United States. And we can't do that. I think the President's military foreign policy, I've second-guessed some things that he has done, but I look back on that and think it's working out pretty well. He had a big mess in Syria, and I didn't like it when he pulled back from the Turkish border. I thought we should have stuck with the Kurds there, too. But I do think Erdogan was coming in regardless, and we didn't need to have American troops doing battle against the Turks. But that was we got in a bad mess there. In any case, that stabilized itself. And when the Iranians shot down the drone, and he had already ordered the launch of a retaliatory strike, he asked the question, how many will be killed? Up to 150 was the answer he got. And he said, scrub the mission, that's disproportional. And so I thought that was a bad sign that he didn't have resolve. But it was sweet symmetry when he used a drone to take out Soleimani, and that was the right kind of message to send. It did the right thing, and I think we reached this place now where maybe the Iranians are going to stop with their aggression against the United States.
Well, remember, Congressman, one of the key tenets of the president's campaign in 2015-16, where he eviscerated the entire Republican field, including a lot of your friends like Ted Cruz, etc. He ran on getting out of these wars, getting out of the Middle East, and getting out of these entanglements. So you have to keep that in mind. Let's get to impeachment. Is it going to end tonight, Congressman Steve King? What do you think?
It feels to me like it can. I mean, this is Friday, and senators like to go home for the weekend, and they don't want things on their mind if they can help it. So, and it looks like Lamar Alexander has come out and said that he's not for calling witnesses. That takes it down to the vote would be, I guess I'll say a squeaker, but it looks like they could block an initiative for witnesses. If they do that, there's a good chance they'd get to a final vote on this. And for me, I have this perspective that I want to see this president exonerated before the State of the Union address, which is February 4th. And I'm really looking forward to Donald Trump standing there with Nancy Pelosi sitting behind him and telling the world that he's been exonerated by the United States Senate. I swear her face will break.
Congressman, tell me your between now and November legislatively, what is your number one priority?
Well, with being in the minority now, I have to. and I have to take what I can get. And
Right.
the things that I would like to do, I mean, I moved the heartbeat bill to where we had the votes to pass it off the floor in the last Congress, and I was blocked by, I'll just say, leadership decision. And so that would be my priority, but I know we're not going anywhere with it. And so I have to just work around the edges and try to find places to slip some amendments in. I got one in was it yesterday or maybe the day before that passed off the floor of the House, and there'll be others that come along the way. But I'm always going to be pushing on everything, defending or promoting everything that has to do with full spectrum constitutional Christian conservatism, and that has really changed the debate when Nancy Pelosi picked up the gavel. So positive initiatives. Also, though, we've been laying together a legislative agenda for the event that we could win back the majority for the next Congress. That's fairly complex healthcare approach and a movement to get towards a balanced budget. I'd love to get to a balanced budget in a second Trump term, and I'll start pressing on that very soon. And I hope it's part of the dialogue in the presidential election coming up. If it is, then we've got a chance. If not, we can look forward to a long time of red ink. And so that would be a high priority for me on that. And then about things that we can look forward to and cheer is that the re-election of Donald Trump raises the likelihood that he would get one and perhaps two more appointments to the United States Supreme Court. If we get Gorsuch 2.0 and Kavanaugh 2.0 onto that Supreme Court, we've got a 7-2 Supreme Court of constitutionalists. And that's just, I'd say, enough to begin to restore our Constitution and fix the damage that's been done by these activist courts over the last 2 generations or more. So I'm enthusiastic about that. I didn't actually think I'd ever see the day we could see that court turn around and have a court seated with constitutionalists.
And Congressman, saw you the other day. You participated in the Committee on the Present Danger China event here in Iowa, and that was a very important issue facing our country.
Well, it sure is, Curtis, and I'm glad you're paying attention to that. I went down to Mar-a-Lago and spent a weekend down there getting briefed on these issues, and I had a good background going down, but I came back with a broader picture where the pieces fit together better for me, where the Chinese are really, they're most everywhere in the world. They've had a growing economy and still a growing population. Growing populations and economies push money and people out, and they've pushed that influence out around the world. And they are they are positioning themselves and already conducting what I would call an asymmetric warfare in direct competition to the United States. And that includes cyber, it includes their military buildup, it includes economic efforts that are going on. We don't know if we know that they're engaging in biological research. And also, as they're emerging as a space war, they're seeking to take a stronger position in the South China Sea. It goes on, and they're stealing our intellectual property at a rate of more than $500 billion a year because they don't have the creativity in China to do these things. It takes American ingenuity to invent, and I guess Chinese tenacity or deviousness to pirate our intellectual property. So when you look at all these pieces, and we see U.S. dollars that are invested in China using to develop technology that they're using back against us, and develop military technology likely that would be fired back against our American troops. I think we have to really raise the question here in Iowa. Our Iowa Public Retirement Plan, IPERS we call it, has millions of dollars invested in China in some of these operations that I've talked about. We think that even the federal retirement plan is in the portfolio, either already invested in China or on the way to be invested in China. And I don't think our retired federal employees or our retired state employees want to see their retirement dollars invested in building up anything in asymmetrical warfare that is in direct competition in the United States. We'd rather build America and like-minded people rather than a competing ideology and a competing country. And that's with that issue we raised, and I think we did a pretty good job of that, but there's much more that needs to be said. It is truly emerging as an existential threat to the United States of America, and it needs to be headed off at the pass. If we are smart about this, we can do this in a relatively peaceful fashion. Then I would add that Huawei contract went on to the United Kingdom, and that opens up with the United Kingdom and 5G access for the Chinese, surveillance that would inhibit a trade agreement with the United Kingdom. So that reach of Huawei around the world gives them a look into almost everything going on. Their surveillance tactics are just growing leaps and bounds and globally. So I want people to be aware of this. We have to do a lot more to get the message out, but at least we got a good start in Des Moines last Monday.
Congressman Steve King, Republican, representative 5th District in Iowa. He used to, in the 4th District, 5th is gone now,
Yes.
with us now. Congressman, thanks you. I'm out of time for this segment. We will have you back. We're live in Des Moines, Iowa.